This has been a bit of a journey to write this book, Ian. Aaron knew, tell us the story here. Aaron knew you were writing it, but didn't want to sit down with you until the very end. Tell me that.
I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I suspect it is. But I made a lot of requests before a sit down with him, obviously, through the Jets, through his agent. I directly reached out to Aaron. I sent him books I had written in the past on Belichick and Coach K, and never really got any response, yes or no. And I actually handed in a manuscript in January without him and assumed that he was not going to cooperate. And frankly, he doesn't owe me anything. And so that's fine. I've done books before with no cooperation. And then in February, I get a message from the Jets that he's now willing to see me. So I had to reopen the book, and I flew out to Malibu to sit down with him, had a bomb scare on the flight, ended up in Chicago, diverted for 8 hours, but survived that. And the 2 hours with him was, they were more than worth it. And he made the book better without question. It was really more of a fact-checking process at the end of all my interviews and talking to his friends, his family members, his parents. His brothers did not talk to me, but I did talk to a lot of people very close to him. And I think he wanted to know, what did you hear? And what do I need to counter or put into context? And it was an enjoyable give and take. And again, he made the book better, and he did not owe me that sit down at all, and I appreciate it.
And I saw him on camera this morning talking to Boomer Esiason, where he said that he actually, Ian, learned things about his family from you, specifically the first chapter here where you tell the story of his grandfather, Edward Rodgers, prisoner of war, served our country in Europe, and he learned things about his grandfather that he had not been told by his family.
Yeah, actually, Aaron's father said that as well about his own father. And the military documents, there's a gentleman named Dan Matthews in Minnesota who's an incredible expert in military records, and he uncovered a lot of this. And Edward Rodgers was an amazing combat pilot in World War II. He flew 44 missions, which is more than double the average lifespan of a combat pilot in World War II in the European theater against Hitler's war machine. And he really was amazing. On St. Patrick's Day in 1944, his plane's on fire, his plane is bullet-ridden, and his squadron peels off because that was protocol. And they were on to the next stage of the mission. And he said, I was all alone over Germany. It was the loneliest feeling in the world. And somehow with 10 men aboard, he got that plane safely back to the American base in Italy. So he was a hero without question, shot down on the 44th mission, beaten when he was captured, mistreated as a POW, gave a war crimes interview with a lot of detail. So I printed out that interview and sent it to Aaron, and I think he appreciated that. And yeah, but I told him, I don't want you to read about some of the disturbing details of his war experience first in this book. I want you to see it from me before you get the book, because it's your grandfather. And so, yeah, that was my favorite chapter, because I got a chance to write about one of the greatest members of the greatest generation. And anytime as a writer you get that opportunity, you take it.
And anyone who just saw Masters of the Air on Apple, I think, can appreciate the stories of that greatest generation and our airmen over Europe. And yes, we'll greatly appreciate that first chapter, which I was trying to read here on the way to work. How did Aaron deal with the other family stuff, the mom and dad and the not talking and the relationships and all of that?
Yeah, that was the most tense part of the conversation I had with him. And the one thing I really appreciated is the fact that he understood that as a biographer, I had to cover this. That if I was writing the story of his life, the fact that he hasn't talked to his parents and his two brothers in almost 10 years, that had to be covered. And there are athletes, I think you would agree with this, who wouldn't understand that. Why not just write about my career? So that helped. And it's the estrangement has gone on for far too long. And there's a lot of he said in it. It's sort of death by a thousand cuts, as opposed to one particular development that unfolded that caused the estrangement. Very complicated, and as most family divisions are. But he was candid about it. There were some things he wouldn't talk about, but he did address some things about that division and estrangement on the record. And the parents and other family members, some blame Olivia Munn for much of this. I don't in my book, because I think Aaron entered that relationship with feelings that maybe she notarized. But at the end of the day, he hasn't dated her in 7 years, and he's still carrying on this estrangement. So it's not all her fault at all. And so, listen, there's a scene in the book that I was very happy to nail down and get on the record from both Aaron and his father. They hugged last year at the Lake Tahoe Celebrity Golf Tournament. And Ed Rodgers told me he hadn't seen or spoken to his son in almost 9 years. And when he turned and 15 feet away is his middle child staring at him, he said, I froze because I forgot what it felt like to have my son in my presence. And they hugged, they cried, or at least Ed did. Aaron had to go back to play the rest of his golf round. But that moment is a very emotional scene in the book, and both talked about it and said it meant a lot to each of them. And hopefully it's the first baby step towards reconciliation, and I think it will be.
Ian O'Connor's book is Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. So after they hugged, he just went back to playing golf, and they never, Ian, reconnected in Tahoe?
They didn't reconnect in Tahoe, and I just think this is one thing. It's going to take Aaron even maybe more time. I don't know. He's trying to figure out a way to kill this thing off. And it's just easier to let it live and let it linger than to confront this living organism that is the estrangement and put an end to it. And I do think there might have been some electronic communication in recent months, brief, but hey, that's something. And I think that the road to a reunification of the family is going to run through the father. His father is his idol, was his idol in college. When he gave an interview at Cal Berkeley, Aaron talked about looking up to Joe Montana and Steve Young as a kid. That's who he wanted to be. But he said, really, my idol is my father. That's who I want to be. And Ed Rodgers was his first coach. He taught him how to play football and was with him all the way, and his biggest fan. So I think clearly if there is a reconciliation, it will go through the father. It'll happen hopefully in the coming months. And then organically, the rest of the family will fall back into place.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.